Didn't really think much about it. You train your whole military career to do your job, and so that was my focus.
David Frey was one of many military personnel deployed during Operation Desert Shield and Storm. Mr. Frey was a part of the 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, Weapons Company, and Charlie Company, along with the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit Special Operations Capable Unit. On August 2nd, Iraqi forces invaded Kuwait. President George Walker Bush ordered the organization of Operation Desert Shield in response to the Iraqi aggression. Saddam Hussein, Iraq's leader, had always believed that Kuwait should be a part of Iraq. Hussein's main goal was to gain control of Kuwait's oil field. Operation Desert Shield's goal was protecting Saudi Arabia of being potentially targeted.
My experience overseas allowed me to kind of see all of the things that people in other parts of the world aren't fortunate to have, like we are, like the freedom of speech or the freedom to kind of do what you want as long as you're willing to stay inside the laws of our land. And so that was something that was cemented in me, to see how those folks had to live, and how the Iraqi army treated the civilian population of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia.
Mr. Frey was already training in the Philippines with his unit when he heard the news of the Iraqis invading Kuwait.
And I remember thinking to myself that, being that we were already deployed overseas and that we were actually closer than some of the other Marine Special Operations capable units, that we would probably be forward deployed to Saudi Arabia and ultimately to Kuwait to kind of, push the Iraqis out of Kuwait.
Iraqi aggression continued, and the United Nations Security Council gave permission for force to be used against Iraqi forces unless they retreated by January 16th. This date came and went, and President Bush then authorized Operation Desert Storm. Thousands of American troops were deployed and sent to Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Along with U.S. forces, NATO allies also sent troops.
I remember when they told us that we were going to go, weird mixture of emotion of fear and excitement. You spend a lot of time in the military training to do your job, and then ultimately when you get the call to do your job, you're not exactly sure how you feel about it, because obviously the job that I had in the Marine Corps, I was in an infantry battalion as a machine gun section leader, meant for us going to war.
The attack first began with bombings in Kuwait and Iraq. Iraq retaliated and sent what are known as Scud missiles into Israel and Saudi Arabia in hopes of forcing the Israeli army into joining their side of the war. The U.S. sided with Israel and protected them from Hussein's Scud missiles.
As a section leader, I had 24 Marines that I was responsible for, so I thought a lot about making sure that they were proficient at their jobs, and ultimately, I guess I would say that my goal was to make sure that all of those Marines got home safe to their families at the end of the deployment.
The U.S. began bombing Baghdad and eventually crossed into Iraq. Many of the Iraqi forces surrendered. After the U.S. pushed Iraqi forces out of Kuwait, a ceasefire was called. 42 days were spent attacking Iraqi forces. Mr. Frey recalls a story of his unit taking an oil station.
And it was occupied by Iraqi Republican Guard units, tanks, and infantry, and we got into a pretty serious gunfight with those guys. Destroyed quite a few of their vehicles, several of their tanks, and ultimately reduced that infantry force. I remember it because we had to go search the buildings afterwards, and as we approached one of the buildings, I had to try to get the door open, and I thought I would be all superhero cool and just punch my elbow through the glass window. Well, when I did, I cut my hand really badly, and ended up having to get stitches for the cut in my hand, and I tried to actually stitch myself up by myself, and I found out that that wasn't a great idea without any local anesthesia. So one of the Navy corpsmen stitched it up for me in the field. So made it through pretty much a whole war, and then, cut my hand trying to be cool by doing some Clint Eastwood stuff to break into a building.
Mr. Frey served in the Marine Corps for almost 5 years. He feels that this experience overseas has molded him into the person he is today.
Just serving in the Marine Corps in general, and then being part of a special operations unit, we learned a lot of things, a lot of intangible things. We learned never to give up or never to quit on ourselves or on our fellow Marines.
I learned from this interview what the military experience during these operations were like. I learned that these Marines were part of special operations, and I learned what they went through. I learned about the lessons they learned, the respect they showed each other, and how it took a toll on some of them.
I feel fortunate in that the experience changed me, I think, for the better. I know that experience had a negative impact on some of my fellow Marines and some of my friends, and it's 30 years later and some of them still haven't bounced back.